Marion Louise Attick, known to us as Grandma Armstrong, was born on July 28, 1903 in Sioux City, Iowa, and died December 5, 1980 in South Bend, Indiana. She was the daughter of Purdy Ewing Attick and Louise Frary Carter. She married her sixth grade sweetheart, James Elliott Armstrong, on June 25, 1927 in Chicago, Illinois. Marion began her college years at the University of Kansas, but with a heart condition resulting from rheumatic fever, she was soon forced to transfer to another college because of the steep campus terrain at KU. Having to walk up and down a steep hill from her residence to her classrooms was too great a strain. Her parents, Purdy and Louise Attick, lived in Chicago at the time, so she soon transferred to the University of Illinois, where she earned her degree. While attending U of I, she was a classmate of Red Grange, one of the earliest football superstars. He became known as the Galloping Ghost and played a vital part in the formation of the National Football League. Marion's heart condition eventually led her to several short stays in the hospital, which also served as respite from raising 5 active boys. Marion had a sister, Mildred Josephine Attick, who was born May 8, 1909 in Kansas City, Missouri, and died November 14, 1997 in South Bend, Indiana. She was, in a sense, like a second mother to Marion's boys, and was affectionately known in the family as Auntie Jo. When Auntie Jo was 70, she married Robin Lee Kirkpatrick Sr., known to the family as Uncle Robin. He died January 3, 2005, in South Bend, Indiana. Marion and Josephine also had a brother, Robert Carter Attick, born June 1, 1911, in Kansas City, Missouri. Uncle Bob died October 15, 1974, in San Francisco, California. Marion's paternal grandfather was Herman Harry Attick, born July 11, 1848, in York County, Pennsylvania. He died March 5, 1930, in Oberlin, Pennsylvania. He married Catherine Graham, who was born March 30, 1849, in Pennsylvania, and died February 17, 1935, in Oberlin, Pennsylvania. The Attick family traces their roots to Niederleitersbach, Germany, and was living in York County, Pennsylvania by 1740. Marion's maternal grandparents were Leslie Homer Carter, born 1837 in Norwalk, Ohio, and Josephine Hyatt, born May 28, 1845, in Maysville, Kentucky. Great-grandparents included Otis Goodman Carter and Julia Berry, DeWitt Clinton Hyatt, and Nancy Black Owen. Nancy's parents were James Owen and Rebecca Kincaid. Dr. Herbert Clark Kincaid did extensive research on the Kincaid history for many years, both in Scotland and in the United States. On April 1, 1931, he wrote to Elizabeth Shelby Kincaid.
The Kincaids are amongst the oldest Scottish families, tracing their ancestries from Alpin, the first king of Scotland, and from the Norman French. Until the year 834, the Scots and Picts, the two principal Scottish races, were constantly at war amongst themselves. In that year, Alpin, king of the Scots, defeated the Picts, but was slain the same year. After a period of 10 years, he was succeeded by his son, Kenneth MacAlpin, as king of the Scots and Picts. His territory including the shires of Dumbarton, Argyll, and Stirling, the latter being the home seat of the Kincaids. The line of descent was unbroken until the death of Alexander III, who left no direct heirs. It is important to remember that surnames were not used at that period. A man was known by his Christian name, and, if an artisan, by his trade, as smith, chandler, butcher, etc., or by his clan or family name with the addition of Mac, meaning son of. The firstborn in direct descent from the head of the clan was usually chief, always in fact, unless disqualified for leadership, and the loyalty of the Scottish clans amongst themselves was only equaled by the bitterness of their hatred, in many cases, for other clans. The third way by which families were known was, in the case of the landed gentry, by the name of their property. Thus, the eldest son of William des Forts, heir to his father's estate, retained the name des Forts. The son who received the lands of Kincaid, a Scottish term meaning a strong place, which lie in the parish of Campsie, county of Lennox, Stirlingshire, not far from Glasgow, became the House of Kincaid, of the laird of that ilk, the younger sons being spoken of as, for instance, John Kincaid in Kincaid, not of Kincaid. It seemed that King Alexander III appointed the founder of the Kincaid family Constable of Edinburgh Castle, which was a very important position, both from a military and a social point of view, and entailed considerable expense on the holder thereof. The then Earl of Lennox Maldwin, his father-in-law, in order to provide him with funds to maintain his position, gave him a charter in 1280 to the lands of Kincaid. The second Lincade, or as then spelled Kincaid, succeeded his father as constable, but was of course out of a job when John Bailowley was awarded the throne of Scotland by Edward I of England, acting as arbitrator. Bailowley turning the castle with others over to the English, and the English garrison being installed. During the conflict between Robert Bruce, or Robert I, and Edward II, after the death of Edward I, the castle of Edinburgh was then invested in 1314 by Scottish forces under Sir Thomas Randolph, Bruce's brother-in-law. Francis, son of the second Kincaid, came to Sir Thomas with the information as a young man during his father's government of Edinburgh that he had carried on an affair with a young lady in the town and had made use of a secret path down the almost perpendicular cliff on which the castle was built in order to conceal his courtship from his father, to say nothing of the garrison. He offered to lead a surprise attack by this path. On a dark night, Francis Kincaid, followed by Sir Thomas and a handful of picked men, climbed the cliff, surprised the garrison, and, after a bloody battle, captured the castle. Francis was knighted for this exploit, and granted the right, by the Bruce, to bear his arms as an honorable tradition thereto, a three-towered castle. He and his successors were also confirmed in their hereditary constableship of Edinburgh, which the family retained for many generations. The Kincaids were always attached to the Stuart cause, and naturally, after the accession of William and Mary to the throne of Great Britain and Ireland, lost this office.
A descendant of these Kincaids, William Kincaid, the father of Rebecca, was born in 1735 in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, and married Eleanor Gay in Augusta County, Virginia. The family settled in the Calf Pasture River region of Virginia, one area where there were many Indian raids on settlers, including two major raids on William and Eleanor's own settlement. During the first, Eleanor escaped into the woods with her two babies. The second raid happened on April 14, 1764. The following letter was written to George Blackburn Kincaid by his father John, the youngest child of William and Eleanor Kincaid.
Cane Spring, April 20th, 1847. Dear Blackburn, you request that I should give you some of your grandmother's early history. She was born August 17th, 1740, was married to your grandfather November 30th, 1756, was taken captive by the Indians April 14th, 1764, from Augusta County, Virginia, 20 miles from Stanton, on the road to Warm Springs. She had, when she was taken, 3 children. The eldest, a daughter 7 years old, the second, a son 4 years old, and the youngest, your Aunt Hamilton, 2 years old. When the Indians came to the house, your grandfather had but a short time left. He had eaten his dinner, had gone to the field out of sight of the house to plow. Your grandmother was sitting just inside the door spinning. The children were playing at the door when suddenly they screamed as though alarmed, and before she had time to rise, an Indian jumped in at the door. There were 5 of them, 4 men and a boy. They immediately went to packing up clothing. They cut open the beds, throwing out the feathers. It was a large house, and several persons had brought their clothing there, believing it to be the most secure place in the neighborhood, and intending to come and build a fort there later. They took off all their clothing. There were 2 guns in the house and a new saddle. They took all of it. She said it was astonishing the loads that they carried. The Indians had never come so early in the season before, and their visit was utterly unlooked for at the time. Your grandfather did not return to the house until night. You may imagine his feelings when he came home and found things as they were. He immediately turned out to raise a company to pursue them, and started out the next morning and followed them 2 or 3 days. But the difficulty of keeping on the trail was too great. They were very careful to leave as little trail as possible. She said she frequently broke limbs of bushes until the Indians noticed and made her quit. When they left the house, they went up the side of the hill and in view of the house and stopped, sat down on a log and stayed some time, fixed her and the children for traveling. They made her pull off her shoes and put moccasins on her and the 2 oldest children. She was in 3 months of having an infant. When they got all fixed, one of the Indians who spoke good English turned to her and said it was the Great Spirit who put her in their hands. She told them she knew it, but the thought passed through her mind that the same Great Spirit was able to take her out of their hands in 6 months. When they started, she had the child, Isabella, 2 years old, to carry. The little boy, Andrew, gave out after traveling several days. 2 of the Indians stopped behind with them, but when they came up, he was not with them, and she saw him no more. After traveling several days, going up a very high and steep mountain, she fell and was not able to get up. The Indians called to her to come along, but she lay still. One of them came, broke a switch, and whipped her severely. She said she never felt it. While he was whipping her, she turned her head and looked at him. He instantly drew his tomahawk. She turned her face from him and waited to receive the blow, but he did not strike. She made an exertion to get up and went to the other Indians. They took the child from her, sat her on a log, and sat on each side of it, and appeared to hold a consultation as to whether to kill it or not. After talking together some time, they asked if the child would have black eyes. She told them that it would. One of them remarked her hair was very black. They immediately decided. One of them that had the saddle fixed it on your grandmother's back so that it gave her the use of her arms, which was a great relief to her. He set the child on top of his pack, which she said was a very heavy one, and carried it into the town. In 2 days, they got home. He gave the child to one of his sisters, who had lost a little one, and she saw it no more until it was given up about 6 months later. When it was taken from her, it spoke English remarkably well, for one its age. And when she saw it next, it could not speak a word of English, but spoke the Indian very well. Nothing very material transpired until they got to the Indian town. They went through the mountains to the Canashaw River, where they had left their canoes, and went by water most of the way afterwards. Soon after getting to the Indians' home, she was adopted into the family of King Beaver and was treated as one of them. She was with them at Zanesville for a large part of the time when she was in captivity. When the time arrived for her to be confined, they would not let her stay in the town, but set her out to the woods, with the squaws attending to her and carrying her food. Her infant was born July 25th, 1764. The fall after, an army was sent against the Indians, commanded by General Bouquet. The Indians were alarmed and agreed to make peace and bring in all the persons that they'd held as captives, when upwards of 200 persons were given up, and among them your grandmother, her infant 3 months old, and the one that was 2 years old, the oldest having taken sick and died during the summer. Your grandfather was with the army, and when the little girl was given up, your grandmother knew her immediately, but he could not recognize her and was in great uneasiness, until her mother asked him if he did not recollect having bled her in the foot. He said he did, and stripping off her moccasin, there was the mark. The Great Spirit was kind to her and delivered her out of their hands in just 6 months from the time she was taken captive. They returned to Augusta County, from where she was taken, and remained there until 1789, and moved here, where they lived until her death. Signed, your affectionate parent, John Kincaid.
James Elliott Armstrong, known to us as Grandpa Armstrong, was born July 28, 1902, in Jackson, Michigan, and died January 16, 1974, in South Bend, Indiana. He was the son of John Elliott Armstrong and Gertrude R. Dolan. He married Marion Louise Attick on June 25, 1927, in Chicago, Illinois. James had a sister, Mary Frances Armstrong, who was born on May 16, 1904, in Jackson, Michigan, but died October 27, 1905, in Brooksville, Florida. John Elliott Armstrong's parents were James Turnbull Armstrong, born February 12, 1850, in Annan, Scotland. He died May 12, 1896. He married Isabel Smith, born October 22, 1850, in Quebec, Canada, and died November 5, 1921, in Jackson, Michigan. James Turnbull Armstrong's parents were Scott Elliott Armstrong, born October 8, 1819, in Canonbie, Scotland. He died August 7, 1888, in Jackson, Michigan. He married Charters Turnbull, born December 31, 1819, in Wilton, Scotland. She died July 20, 1859. Scott Elliott Armstrong was a gardener in Annan, Scotland, and in 1852, he, along with his wife Charters, his older brother Thomas, and 3 children came to Canada. Scott and Charters settled in Lennox and Addington County, Ontario. In 1859, Charters died, and soon after that, Scott Elliott moved with his 7 children to Jackson, Michigan. There he married James Mackey in 1862. A son of Scott Elliott and Charters, James Turnbull Armstrong, born in 1850, married Isabella Smith in 1874. Isabella was born in Frampton, Quebec, to Irish parents John and Frances Dixon Smith in 1850. James T. and Isabella's oldest child was John Elliott Armstrong, born in 1874. In 1894, Allie, as he was known, served in the Michigan National Guard, Armory Company H, 1st Regiment. Allie married Gertrude Dolan, the youngest child of Terence and Elizabeth Betsy Corkin Dolan. Allie was Episcopalian and was paid to sing at the Catholic Church, where Gertie belonged. This apparently was where they became acquainted. James Elliott Armstrong was born to them in 1902. The 1900 federal census shows that Allie worked at a corset factory. The marriage license application, also in 1900, says his occupation was paper box maker. Could he have been making boxes for the corsets to be shipped in? A little research shows that around the turn of the century, there were 16 corset manufacturers in Jackson, Michigan. Unfortunately, Allie's health was not good in 1904, the year that Mary Frances, James's baby sister, was born. He was advised to move to Florida, which the family did. Even so, about a year later, Allie died of consumption, now known as tuberculosis, on October 13, 1905. Soon after, his daughter, little Mary Frances, died as well. In 1910, James's mother Gertrude married James W. Clark in Florida. However, Gertie died in March of 1912. On April 13, 1912, Sister M. Eugenia, Gertrude's aunt at the Holy Rosary Convent in Detroit, wrote to Gertrude's sister, Mary Dolan, saying, "I sincerely hope that Gertrude made some definite arrangements. If no, then I'm sure you will see to it now. The sooner, the better." Shortly thereafter, James went to Niles, Michigan, to live with his Aunt Mary. During his days in Niles, James attended Niles High School. His sophomore year, he was class president and in the boys' glee club. During his junior year, he had the lead role in the junior play, A Scrap of Paper, was class president, was active in the Hamiltonian Literary Society and debate teams, was voted most popular boy, handsomest boy, and Lord High, scrubber of the moon's face by the League of Long, likewise lengthy limbs. His senior year, he was editor-in-chief of the school newspaper, The Tatler, a member of the Board of Control, was voted handsomest boy and placed second for most popular, and was quoted in a conversation with one of his teachers. James, after reading an article in the paper, "Guess I'll have to lose a leg. Here's a girl that gets $7,650 for a loss of a leg in a railroad accident." Mr. Zabel, "Do you figure you could get that much?" James, "More." Mr. Zabel, "How so?" James, "Mine's longer." James applied to and was accepted at the University of Notre Dame. He commuted daily on an electric trolley car and worked at the Niles post office during the summer hours. He was required to carry a pistol in his mail bag while delivering. Later, he kept the pistol in an old file drawer in the dingy basement on Johnson Street. Youngest sons Gregory and Douglas, as 8 or 9-year-olds, discovered it one day as they snooped around, as they often did. The cabinet was flimsy and easy enough for even kids to jimmy. The pistol was in a box and was a small nickel-plated revolver, complete with 30-year-old bullets. A time or two, both Greg and Doug loaded the revolver and chased each other around the house playing cops and robbers. This memory, according to Doug. Greg says, "Horrors! I never, ever would have done that." This, as Doug remembers, was a story that you would never reveal to your parents, regardless of age. James graduated from Notre Dame with extreme honors and shortly went to work for the university. Not much is known about what he did in his early days at Notre Dame, but we do know he eventually was assigned to work with Newt Rockne as a sports information writer. As part of the job, he sent news releases to the local newspapers. James and Marion's second son, Richard, remembered hearing that there was a feeling that Newt was not happy with James's writing, as it was not slanted appropriately to Newt's liking. Fortunately, the relationship was short-lived when James was assigned to develop the alumni office, which became his full-time career for 41 years.
From 1950 to 1953, the Korean War was taking place. The nation was assured that it wasn't really a war, but merely a police action. Nonetheless, thousands of Americans were wounded and dying daily. Most young American men were getting drafted into the military without a choice and with few exceptions. And it was for sure that if you were going to be drafted, you were headed to Korea for battle. In the past, James E Armstrong had twice avoided the military, too young for World War I and too old for World War II. John Armstrong was attending Notre Dame. He received his greetings, as draft notices were known, in the mail one day. He was to report in 30 days for active duty, which would be a 2-year military obligation, regardless if he were in college or not. Marion Armstrong's reaction was not unexpected. When she saw the federal return address in the morning mail, she cried in anguish. The assumption was that he was going to go to Korea. However, at the end of his training period in Kansas and before being shipped overseas, he was offered an assignment with his company commander, who was being sent to an army base in Iceland. John quickly accepted this offer. Marion and James were elated that their firstborn had escaped the front lines of Korea. Richard Armstrong's draft notice soon followed. He was away tending school at Catholic University in Washington, D.C. Marion's emotional reaction to the draft notice was the same as John's. Richard soon left for basic training near Indianapolis and received a marksmanship medal, which surely would assure his assignment to Korea. Instead, Richard was sent to a military intelligence school in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and that's where he spent his military service. Back home, Marion and James raved over their parental blessings. Philip Armstrong was exempted from military duty by virtue of belonging to a religious order. The Korean War ended in 1953, and the Armstrongs were free from involvement with it. Gregory Armstrong tried to join the Air Force in 1960, but due to a congenital defect and no wars in progress, was not accepted. However, in 1967, now married and in the process of adopting his 2 boys, he received greetings and passed his physical exam. Ultimately, he was classified as a father and did not have to go to Vietnam. Douglas Armstrong, who faced being drafted immediately after finishing high school, chose instead to join the Army voluntarily at 17 years of age. There was no war at the time, and Vietnam was still a few years away, but the draft was still mandatory. The Army was quietly offering a new Army Reserve alternative plan. It meant Douglas had to serve only a 6-month active duty obligation, followed by 4 years of weekly ongoing training at a local reserve center. He recognized a piece of cake when he saw one, and avoided a 2-year obligation with no regrets. 6 men in the Armstrong family all managed to avoid outright war and its horrors. Marion and James were remarkably blessed. Richard and Philip worked together part-time at a South Bend social organization known as the Progress Club. Prior to the club building construction, there had been a mansion house on the site, the residence of Schuyler Colfax, the Vice President of the United States under President Grant. During the Civil War, General William T. Sherman and his family had on several occasions visited South Bend, St. Mary's College, and Notre Dame. There were some years when the Sherman children were in residence and attended the Notre Dame Children's School on the campus, which the university provided at that time. The general, of course, is remembered for his Civil War March to the Sea in Georgia in 1864. His wife and children resided safely at the Schuyler Colfax home in South Bend for the duration of that infamous march. Richard and Philip also did some summertime work at Notre Dame, painting tennis court fences and coming home with silver paint all over them. They also painted seat numbers on the benches in the stadium. Later, as a ticket holder, Doug held them personally to blame for the miserably narrow sitting space in between seat numbers. When Richard Armstrong was just 14 years old, James and Marion allowed him to go with a friend, unattended, to New York City. The rationale of his parents allowing this is a mystery for the ages. But by sheer happenstance, the boys were not only in New York City, but were actually in New York Times Square when World War II's victory in Japan was proclaimed in August of 1945. Known as VJ Day, we remember the newspaper headlines, the pictures of crowds cheering in the streets, and the famous photo of a celebrating sailor kissing an unknown nurse in the turmoil. Gregory is the one who recalls this episode, which Douglas was totally unaware of. After the war, however, one of the joys of Doug and Greg's youth were the good times when Philip would take them downtown on the bus to South Bend's War Surplus store. It was jammed and filled with overflows of helmets and canteens, airplane goggles, army knives, and canvas tents, everything except for military guns. All the stuff was real, just like actual real soldiers had. What a fun time for boys our age. And then there was the time Gregory, age 5, set fire to the house on Johnson Street. He coaxed Douglas, who was age 4, to go down to the basement with him. Douglas, who was lamb-like and doe-eyed, tagged along thinking perhaps a fun exploration into interesting drawers and boxes would follow. Greg suggested that they build a small campfire first and piled some loose newspaper into an empty box. Then, striking a match, he set the newspapers on fire. Doug stared at him and the growing fire in amazement. The flames grew and lifted straight up in a column and quickly lit the wooden upper floor joists up above. "Look, my brother." Doug remembers him chuckling, but maybe that was just his imagination. "Behold how bright and shiny are the warm, dancing fingers," he grinned. Quickly, of course, they both stepped back in sheer panic and bolted up the stairways into their bedroom and hid under their beds. Marion naturally sensed a big rat. She sent Philip down to the basement to investigate. Phil shouted up, "It's on fire!" Richard was at home too, and the three of them luckily managed to extinguish everything without need of calling the fire department. Phil came upstairs and found us in our clever hiding places. Marion scolded us severely and issued the ringing warning, "Just wait till your father gets home." Douglas vividly remembers it was the first real hard physical spanking James ever administered to Greg and Doug, and the last one too. James and Marion were by nature unexpectedly gentle and very soft-spoken, despite having 5 boys to raise. Greg says, "This story is mostly a fabrication of the younger pyromaniac's imagination." Richard had apparently seen the movie Frankenstein or some film of that nature. He decided to do his own thing. Over a few days, he worked in secret down in our dim and dingy basement, which already was a very scary place. He ordered Greg and Doug to stay out of the basement. Soon, he completed his creation and announced to us that he'd named him Greg. Richard invited us to come down with him and meet Greg, his new house guest. And there he was, sitting on a chair in the coal bin, all stuffed and lumpy looking, dressed in shabby clothes and work gloves. Had a whole coconut for a head with an ugly, weird-looking painted face. We stood there staring spellbound at it, frightened but curious. That was the cue for Richard's genius and showmanship, with John's help outside. Greg suddenly wiggled on his chair and then popped upright. We levitated in fear. We'd paid no attention to the rope in Richard's hand, which he'd strung up over a pulley and down to Greg. Nor did we notice the garden hose being fed through a basement window outside to the yard that John was making horrible noises into. We fled in absolute terror up the basement stairs. Marion was none too happy with Richard until he dismantled Greg completely. Of course, This is what Douglas vaguely remembers of the incident. For a period of time, when Greg and Doug were no older than 6 or 7, Phil got it into his head to tease them with a story about some men who might be dangerous and who'd been seen around some of the nearby neighborhoods. But we should not worry too much. Just be careful playing outdoors, he advised. Shortly, he revealed that the name of the man was E. Tret. This was quite a suspicious-sounding name. Letting our imaginations have time to work overtime, Phil then told us that E. Tret had been spotted by the police driving a telephone company truck, and that they had information that he was to park in the alley behind our house very soon. That same day, a phone company truck did actually indeed turn into our alley and stop right behind our house. We were really spooked. Was he coming for Greg and Doug? Marion assured us that Phil was just playing and teasing. It must have been that very night that Doug, while trying to sleep, visualized E. Tret climbing up onto the neighbor's roof, which was only about 5 feet away from our bedroom window. E. Tret's obvious intent was to leap across the divide and crash through our bedroom window to whisk us away. Douglas was intensely upset, and Marion was upset with Phil, and Phil seemed upset that he wouldn't be allowed to milk his scheme just a little while longer. In hindsight, he somehow must have had something to do with a real phone truck stopping right behind our house. In reality, though, Greg and Doug have very fond memories of both Richard and Philip and their generosity in doing things with us. They were good big brothers. Richard took us to movies and bought us children's phonograph records. Richard also led Gregory to a lifelong love of classical music and opera. Phil took us on hikes out to Notre Dame along the railroad tracks and out to the airport. Douglas personally has almost no recollection or full stories of John, probably because of a 10-year difference in their ages. Doug remembers most of his being absent from the house for one reason or another as they were growing up. Douglas was anxious for the day that he too could shave every morning like his big brother. John had a group of friends in high school, and they formed a jacket club called the Warriors. Douglas remembers James and Marion were not at all thrilled with that. John was always a late-night returner to the house. There were occasions where some of the gang would go camping on Lake Michigan, near Ludington. Doug remembers, as a young teenager, visiting him in Pontiac, Michigan, where he had moved right after his military service to take a job in a small radio station. He had bought a new 1955 Plymouth, which we thought was pretty cool. Doug remembers his job at a local television station in South Bend, where he met Mary, and we, of course, attended their wedding. But most of his friends and haunts were activities that were not part of our generation, and we were too far young to be included by him in anything that he was up to. Doug remembers visiting John and Mary's house in Los Angeles, and Timothy when he was just a 2-year-old. Greg remembers visiting in Los Angeles to celebrate his 21st birthday, just days before Tim was born, and Jeff 11 days later.
Okay.
This is Station Armstrong. We're going to have a word from a few of the Armstrong family, starting with my Aunt, Jo.
Oh, because I'm like the after-dinner speaker who all I could say was I'm too full for words.
Speak, a little more.
Yes.
Oh, pardon me. Must I repeat the same story?
Yeah,
It's
all right. Come on, repeat.
I'm just like the after-dinner speaker who said I'm too full for words.
Oh, that's jolly. Now I have a word from Gregory, my brother.
Well, I haven't much to say, but I'm glad that Dick and Phil are both here and everybody else.
And now I have a word from my grandmother.
Thank you.
Oh, I can't tell you how wonderful it is to be here with my 5 splendid grandsons and all the rest of the family for Christmas 1951.
Your name, please?
Is it going to be Daddy? Grandmother.
We'll send you a check for $10. Now a word from my grandfather, Attick.
Well, I'll tell you, boys and girls, this will be my 74th Christmas. It'll be the most enjoyable one of all.
Oh, that's good.
Signed, Gangy.
Now a word from my mother.
Oh, well, this is simply a red letter day in my life. It's just wonderful and one of the very best Christmases I ever had.
Well, now a word from my father. Thank you, Mrs. Armstrong.
Everybody always wants to know what I want for Christmas, and I never seem to be able to convince them. So I'd like to put in an order now for my Christmas presents for lots of Christmases ahead. It's just the presence of everybody in the years ahead that's here today.
Thank you, Mr. Armstrong. Now a word from my big brother, Phil, who is a brother out to officiate.
Officiate?
Pardon me.
Well, I'd like to say one thing, and that is, I am very happy to be here. And furthermore, in conclusion, I would like to say that he who holds the microphone must grow within the next couple of years if he's going to keep pace with the rest of the family at the present time.
Oh, thank you. Now a word from my biggest brother.
Thank you.
2 words, thank you.
Well, I'm very happy to be here for this Christmas. It might be the last one for a long time.
Oh, well, he could have gone down to Florida.
Merry Christmas to everybody anyhow.
Usual church.
Now a word from our recorder man himself.
Well, it's been tough, but I hope it's all come across. And the sentiments expressed mirror exactly those which are in my heart.
All right. Someone suggested that we sing a Christmas carol, and I think Josephine Attick should sing it so we can call it an anticlimax.
Jingle bells, jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Jingle bells, jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh.
Day of February, 1970. And grandfather is very happy to be talking to Timothy Armstrong, grandson. How does it affect your young life to have a grandfather butt in on it for a couple of weeks?
Kind of nosy.
Well, don't you think that if it wasn't for grandfather looking in occasionally that you might go astray without the guidance of your father's father?
Well, the way I figured, I think I'm guiding you, like going to school and coming back, and if it wasn't for me, you'd be lost.
Well, maybe you have something there. The generation gap is pretty wide, but it's a real pleasure for Grandpa and Grandma to come out and watch you and your brother and your sister and your cousins grow. But I will try, because I feel that a grandfather should pass on his experience and wisdom and knowledge to his grandsons, not because they listen to him, but just to get it out of his system. Do you mind having Grandma and Grandpa visit you once in a while just because they enjoy it so much, even if it interferes with your life?
Not at all. I don't see anything wrong with it at all.
That's encouraging news, and I'm sure your grandmother will be pleased to hear that, too.
Well, I'm interviewing my second oldest grandson, who happens to be almost as tall as I am. And, I'm very impressed by his size and brilliance. And I hope that I will live to see the day when he is grown and Oh, what is he going to become? He hasn't told me.
I think I'll be an MD-er.
An MD or what else?
A doctor.
That's good.
I'm going to be a doctor or else.
What happened to your previous commitment to being a priest?
Well, I decided I just decided that wasn't my scoop.
Who are you, nice boy?
I know.
Who are you?
I don't know.
Look up there. Look up there. Who are you, little boy?
Look at this.
You don't know? I thought you were James Elliott Armstrong II. You have a very great name, and I hope you will live up to it.
I don't know.
I think it's a very good name, don't you? Grandma thinks it's a very good name. What about you?
Nothing.
Oh, nothing. Well, you're a lot of something right now.
My name is Nothing.
Your name is Nothing? Well, you look just like James Elliott Armstrong II. All right, it'll be your turn just a minute, Jeannie. You look over here. Look over there.
I think,
Oh, what do you think?
well, let's see. Batman.
Are you Batman? What are you going to be when you grow up?
A frog.
Oh, that's interesting. You want to let your cousin Jeannie talk?
Y-E-S spells yes.
Excellent, excellent. That's very good. Okay, Jean. Hello, Jean. How are you today?
Fine.
You are next to our youngest granddaughter, but you are growing so fast, you're going to be a big girl soon. How about that?
Yes.
Yes, you are.
This is, cereal.
What was that?
Cereal.
What did you say, sweetheart?
Cereal.
Oh, cereal. Are you a lady actress in the serials?
That's it.
That's it. How about that?
Nope.
No?
Nope.
What kind of cereal do you like for breakfast?
Cheerios.
Cheerios. Are you going to do a commercial for Cheerios?
Yep.
All right. What about Cheerios?
Cheerios.
Do you lend them to your mother to get her go?
Yeah.
Keep her go?
Yeah.
That's a good girl.
And then, but it's a mix.
Did you get what she said? Well, you're a very nice girl. How about letting your brother Tim talk a minute, okay? You see yourself over there?
No.
Look in the picture there. There's Jean. You see Jean? Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, sweetheart. This is to introduce Timothy Michael Armstrong, who happens to be our oldest grandson by 11 days. How about your arithmetic?
Well, I'm doing pretty good.
Well, if you could say it's 15 days and it's only 11, how do you come up with that?
I don't know. I think my mom said it was 15.
Well, how about your birthday is the 10th, and when is Jeff's?
The 20th? First. 11 days.
Oh, okay, we settled that. What do you think you will choose to do when you're grown?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe a fuzz or a priest or something.
Well, that's quite a selection. Of course, you'll have to study this matter carefully before you decide. I hope you will give it serious consideration.
Yes, I will.
Will you come back to South Bend again?
Yeah, as soon as I'm a millionaire.
Oh, not before?
Yeah, before.
Well, good. We'll be delighted to see you. Make it as soon as you can. Now, I think we have another interesting young man here we'd like to interview.
Oh, I'd like to introduce him.
All right, you may introduce him.
His nickname is Pig. He is 8 years old and loves to chew on his fingernails and fingers. His name is Jonathan Armstrong. Shut up.
This is our, let me see, are you number 3 grandson? Yes, you're older than Brad, aren't you? So you must be number 3. Okay. Do you know yet what you're going to do when you're grown?
No.
Have you any plans for the future?
Yeah.
Please tell us about these.
I forgot.
You forgot what you're going to do? What is your favorite subject in school?
Math.
Well, you might be an engineer or a scientist.
No.
Do you like art?
Yeah.
Well, that sounds very interesting, and I hope you too will come to South Bend to visit us.
Yeah, me too.
How soon? Oh, good heavens, you'll blow the tube. I believe I have a young lady to interview now by the name of Margaret Louise Armstrong.
I'll introduce her.
Fine. Hello, Margie Armstrong. You happen to be the oldest granddaughter of James and Marion Armstrong, and you were given the same middle name as your grandmother, which makes it pretty special. Are you happy with your name?
Yeah. No.
You are? Oh, I hoped you would be. What do you think you'll do when you're a grown lady?
I don't know.
Well, would you care to be a housewife and mother of beautiful children?
No.
Oh, a nurse?
Yeah.
You might. All right, tell us more.
Tell us about school. What are you doing in school now?
Oh, I know. She's a famous brownie and recently went skating with her mother, I understand. Is this true, Margie?
Yeah.
What else do you do as a brownie?
Make things.
What have you made?
Aprons.
Oh, I saw your apron, and it was very good. Now tell me, what is the next thing you're going to do with the brownies?
We're going to go hiking.
That sounds like fun. I wish I could go along. Do you think they'll ever have a time when they'll have a Grandmother's Day?
Yes.
Oh, I think that'd be fine. I'd like to come if they do. Look up at the camera, honey, so we can see you. And, oh, such a nice, sweet girl. Will you come to South Bend to see us, too?
Yes.
Oh, I hope so. Well, that's lovely, and I'm very happy to have talked to all the grandchildren here. And who's going to do the commercial?
And now, as a special treat to our women listeners, here is a special recipe recently developed in our Great Plains Oats kitchen up there in Paradise, Minnesota. Grandmother Clementine, will you tell us about it?
Thanks, George. You know, I'm always glad to unveil these new recipes to you, because you know and I know that anything made with Great Plains oats is bound to be something different in the way it tastes. Today's recipe is for an Equator double layer cake. Just about the tastiest thing we've ever developed up there in my kitchen. This is Grandmother Clementine saying, if you must sow your oats, don't settle for the wild kind. Insist on Great Plains oats.
Thanks a lot, Grandmother Clementine, for that thrilling new recipe. And say, listener, you won't want to miss the thrilling new offer made possible through Grandmother Clementine's great generosity. For only $5, yes, for only $5, to cover the cost of mailing and handling, you too can have an autographed copy of Grandmother Clementine's cookbook, absolutely free. Hear what some of our satisfied customers have to say about this wonderful new publication miracle.
It's the biggest thing since Gone with the Wind.
It took 3 volumes of the Britannica to sit my daughter comfortably at her place. Grandmother Clementine, bless her, does it with 1.
Reading the Bible was a breeze compared to this.
The section on fudge reads hotter than forever amber.
Yes, you can't afford to miss Grandmother Clementine's cookbook. Send all checks and money orders to Fast Deal, New York 30 1/2, New York.
Beep, 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 beep. I am Kent Armstrong, and I'm broadcasting for the KNXT News. And I am Brad Armstrong, and I am Brad Armstrong with Kent Armstrong. And behind me and Kent, behind me and Kent, there is my brother Stephen. We came on the train. We came on the train, and we sat and we. Daddy, what was the car name that we had in? The whole car. And we sat in the dome car, and we went in 17 tunnels. And we ate some ice cream and cookies and candy.
Where did we eat the ice cream?
In the dome car.
Where were we?
On the train.
Where was the train?
On the track. It was on the track.
Now, tell us who was here. You said your cousins. Who are your cousins? What are their names?
Timmy and Kent.
Yeah.
That's my cousins' names. And I had my grandma over.
Now, wait a minute. Beside
and
Timmy.
A friend named Mr. Hogarth. And we had our cousin's mother and father. That's Mary and Jack.
All right, but that's your Uncle Jack and Aunt Mary.
He's my Uncle Jack and Aunt.
But beside Timmy and Kent, you had another cousin over here. Who was that? How could you forget your little cousin Jeannie?
Oh,
How could you forget her, huh?
Look into the camera.
Looking into the camera.
Oh, good evening. This is Gregory Armstrong, host of the Every Night Show. Tonight we have with us, as our first guest, and probably our only one, because she's so talkative, the beautiful Constance Armstrong. Miss Armstrong, what are you up to these days?
Well, nothing much.
Well, are you working?
Yes.
Are you on the stage, or are you working on a movie?
I didn't hear that question.
I said, are you on the stage, or are you working on a movie?
Well, neither really.
Well,
right now, that is.
You said you're working. What are you doing? Can you be a little more explicit?
Well, you really don't want to know the answer to that question, I don't believe. Not on television.
Well, we're not trying to get personal, but what if you're not working on stage or screen, you must be in television. Is this true?
Well, once in a while, yes. I think I'd have to answer that, yes.
Well, are you in a series?
No, not a series, no.
Are you on at all?
Well, now and then I do a commercial, you know how it is. You know, now and then, once in a while.
Well, okay. We've, of course, read a lot about you over the years. What was the highlight of your career?
I'd have to say that was when I decided to quit.
We didn't know you had quit.
Well, you know, it's one of those decisions one of those things that I've been thinking about for years, and I finally come to the decision that I'm going to retire now.
Well, what are you going to do with yourself?
Oh, I'll probably relax on a couch somewhere eating bonbons.
That sounds like fun. Well, that's all the time we have for tonight. Let's say goodnight to Connie Armstrong. Everybody give her a cheer.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight we have a very special guest. His name is Jack Armstrong. Isn't that cute? Good evening, Jack. We're glad to have you here tonight.
Oh, well, I'm very happy to be here.
Mr. Armstrong, that is Jack. He's an artist. And you know how clever those people are. Would you like to tell us a little bit about some of your artwork?
Well, you see, it stems from my background. I was brought up in the frog country of the San Joaquin Valley. I was raised on the west side of Early Mart.
Oh, that's so interesting. Now, would you like to tell us a little bit more about the work that you're doing right now?
Well, my cultural background stems entirely from this background.
Oh, you don't really have to put your arms around the interviewer. But we do want to be friendly,
That's
but you know.
part of my thing. Right.
Artists are friendly people, I see.
They certainly are.
How nice, folks. That's nice.
Well, I'm very happy to be here.
Well, you're a nice guy. You know,
Thank you.
I rather like you.
You'll have to come up to Early Mart with me.
Yes, I think we should all be friendly. This is what our show is all about: peace and friendship, and things like that. Now, for instance, is it true that you paint ladies' knees? Of course, you don't do that.
I don't do that, no.
That is a rumor, then.
Yes, it certainly is. I never go below the navel.
That's nice. Could you tell us some of your designs, for instance?
Well, most of them are just geometric.
And this all means something to you, doesn't it? You don't just do this.
Not to me. I couldn't care less, but these people tell me they want.
Well, they say art has to have a meaning. Surely you have a meaning, don't you? You have a meaning?
No.
You have no meaning whatsoever.
It's not true.
You stand for nothing.
No
You're just an old hypocrite, huh?
No.
Well, is it true that you do this to get something, work something out of you?
No.
I mean, it's a syndrome or something.
No.
So, when did you get started in this?
Well, I used to do it when I went frog hunting. I'd take my easel and
would you suggest that other people go frog hunting often? Oh, girls frog hunt too. Would you
Yes.
would you actually like to make a statement about frog hunting?
I would
recommend
that every other person do this.
And it's healthy.
It certainly is.
And it's fun?
Yes.
Exciting.
Yes.
Okay, that's it, ladies and gentlemen. We think that people should frog hunt. It's very good.
Bye.